Howdy, folks. Welcome to the podcast Iron. My name is Laura Mullen Vermilia, and on this podcast, I interview members of the cast iron art community in order to inspire, educate, and spread ideas about iron casting and cast iron art. I am delighted to tell you that our guest on today's show is Elizabeth Kronfield, and many of you in the community already know her as Biz. It was so impactful for me to get this opportunity to chat with her about how her work changed from stone and steel to eventually incorporate cast iron. Hearing her experiences as a grad at UGA, as an emerging artist for Sloss Metal Arts, and then hearing all of the other life adventures that her career has taken her through was compelling and inspirational. Biz, thank you for taking the time to chat with me and letting me ask you all of my typical questions, as well as all of the new ones that popped up during your interview. Your outlook on the use of cast iron as an artistic material offers an intriguing point of view that I find compelling. Also, hearing why you and Matt go above and beyond to introduce iron to fellow artists and students reinforces my outlook of our community's hope and perseverance that I feel we bring to the forefront of contemporary art making. The podcast Iron Show is sponsored in part by supporters on Patreon. So thank you to everyone who has joined as a Patreon member to help me afford the production costs of this show. And as always, you know that I am so proud to say that this episode is brought to you by our top supporter, Sloss Metal Arts, which is a national center for iron casting and metal art. For more information about the Sloss Metal Arts program, visit their website, which is slossmetalarts.com, but also follow them on Instagram at Sloss Metal Arts. Additionally, if you want to keep up to date on the national conference that Sloss Metal Arts will be hosting this upcoming April, then you should follow the conference handle, which is NCCCIAP on Instagram. And also periodically check their website, which is www.nccciap.com. And at the moment, they're accepting applications to the juried exhibition. And I don't think that there's an entry fee for the exhibition application, so there's no reason to not apply. Well, let's get on with this business. So thanks so much for tuning in today, and please enjoy. Elizabeth Kronfield, a lot of people in our community know you as Biz. Welcome to the show today.
Thank you so much. It's pretty cool to be here.
I've been really looking forward to this interview for a long time, ever since I first contacted you and then we worked together to schedule it. I've been really looking forward to hearing your story and seeing what I can learn about my alma mater as well. But so let's get this show on the road, as is tradition. Biz, well, who the hell are you anyways?
So I'm Elizabeth Kronfield, otherwise known as Biz. I'm the director of the School of Art and the School for American Crafts at Rochester Institute of Technology, where I'm also a sculpture professor, although the director part now kind of outweighs the sculpture professor part right this minute. I'm also wife of Matthew Wicker and mother of Tegan Wicker and maker of stuff, and that's who I am.
Thank you. So I obviously want to get right to the iron because that is my prerogative, but let's start back. I want to know a little bit about maybe your formative years and how you got introduced to art or found some artistic tendencies when you were a child.
So, I don't have great memories of being a kid. I have little bits and pieces here and there, but I was an only child. I'm an only child. I always liked making stuff and doing things with my hands. Always. I don't remember drawing as a kid. I don't remember specifically making art when I was a little kid, although my mom has stories of me drawing all over the walls and, well, you never told me not to kind of thing. But I don't really like, I didn't go to art classes as a kid. I didn't have anybody in the family that was an artist. My parents were both musicians. They taught K through 12 music. And so there was artistic influences in some way, shape, and form. But my dad always did stuff. He just did everything. He's basically ADD, but just long before it was ever something that was diagnosed. And so he always has to be doing something, even now. And so I was always helping him do stuff, or doing stuff on my own. There was never like sit, be quiet. It was always busy, busy, do stuff. So that's really like my very young years, as I can just remember doing stuff, and whether that was out in a field playing with mud, or whether it was playing with animals or playing. I was a big Barbie person. I know that's really hard to believe, anybody that knows me, but I had every Barbie there was when I was little. Totally not me now, but
I mean, I
at
also feel
age
like there's no shame. There's no shame in admitting that. I mean, I don't think so.
it seems
I,
completely foreign now, but at the
mhm,
time, it was all about Barbie.
mhm.
Everything from making mud pies to playing with Barbies. I was always constantly doing stuff. I was never somebody to sit and watch TV, or watch movies or anything like that. I had to be doing stuff. So that was like the early years. And like I said, I don't have a lot of great memories. I don't have not that I don't have not that I have a bunch of bad memories. I just don't have a lot of memories.
Yeah.
Once I got into like high school is where I started getting excited with art. I had a few really good teachers that kind of fostered creativity more than um, like scientific rendering. They were
Hmm.
they were more about originality and creativity than they were about replicating what you see. And it's so funny because now that I'm in academia and steeped in the middle of academia, it's all about, oh, drawings from direct observation. You need more drawings from direct observation. I say that so many times. But
Yeah.
when I was in high school, I did so little drawings from direct observation, and I hated doing drawings from direct observation. So I had Mrs. Whitlock was my high school teacher that really was very much about sculpture,
Hmm.
and that drove home for me. Like the
Hmm.
making stuff in space I was like, aha, this is what I like to do. And it was clay at the time, and it was cardboard at the time, but it was something that was exciting for me, and something new, and something that was kind of all my own. I guess maybe that was exciting because I didn't have formal art training up until that point. That I didn't go to special schools. I was just in the public school system, in the plain old regular art class. It wasn't like special classes or anything. It was just art, and we were all thrown in there together, and it was something new and exciting for me.
So then did that translate into going into college?
Definitely, yeah, that definitely laid the groundwork for me to go into college. And um I've always loved animals, especially horses. And so when I graduated high school, I either wanted to be a horse trainer or I wanted to be an artist. Neither one is a very, what do I want to say, profitable future. Like,
Yeah, I was gonna say lucrative profession, but along the
right.
same,
Yeah, right.
yeah.
Same thing, right? Yeah. So um my parents were pretty much like, you're going to college and there's no
Yeah.
horse. Well, there was one school that was horse training for college, but it was like, okay, well then I'm going into art. And I
Yeah.
didn't know really specifics. I knew I liked three-dimensional stuff. I knew I liked making with my hands. I went to Bowling Green State University in Ohio, and um, it was great for me. It was not that expensive, so I could afford to go to school there, and it was close to home, so I could work and continue to do a lot of the things that I'd been doing, and still go to school and study art. And what was even better than that was I didn't have to have a portfolio review to get into it.
Oh, good. Okay.
So I had not a huge portfolio from high school. So again, not a lot of drawings from direct observation that would get me into all the art schools.
Yeah.
So it was a good fit for me. And I went in and I had some fabulous teachers and um, really kind of like fell in love with everything. Didn't know what my major wanted to be at first. Really liked photography, which was weird. Um, like because I had been so three-dimensional. So it was
Okay.
weird for
Yeah.
me to then be behind the camera and really, really kind of dealing with just composition. But I kind of went back and forth and then I had to get messy. I had to get dirty and it was sculpture.
Yeah.
And yeah, I took sculpture one and really enjoyed sculpture one and then went into sculpture two and the requirement was to carve a stone. So we had to carve a piece of limestone. And I tell all my students this whenever I go through my stone carving project is I absolutely hated it. It was the worst thing ever, like blood, sweat, tears into the stone. Got done and said, okay, where's my next stone? Like
Oh,
I want something bigger. Like where's the next bigger one? So fell in love with that
wow. Through the process of doing it.
through the process. Well, actually after, like during the
Okay.
process, I hated it.
Huh.
Every single minute of it. Like, oh, this is stupid. Why do we have to carve a stone? I don't want to do this. And I saw other sculpture students like casting or welding, and I wanted to do that. And
Mm-hmm.
I'd already welded in my first project in sculpture one, and it's so fast, it's so easy, it's so rewarding, instant gratification, right?
Yeah.
Like, well, like, woohoo, that's where it's at. And then stone
Yeah.
carving, you just work for weeks and you get nowhere, and you just get dirty, and finally at the end, you have something kind of rewarding.
Yeah. I wonder what it was that made you may not even have the answer to this, but do you think it was the sense of accomplishment at the end or seeing what you did or what
I have
made
a feeling
you?
it was just the labor. I mean, I really do. I
Mm,
have the feeling it was kind of the labor. It became more later for me. Like
hmm
I actually like started to connect to stone and different types of stone,
Okay.
and I was lucky. That one was limestone, which is a nice stone to carve because it's not super hard. It's not super soft. It's kind of middle range, and it's also as a sedimentary stone, it doesn't have a lot of veining or anything that makes it like beautiful. So
Okay.
it just was a form. It was just creating my form, and I didn't have to deal with the baggage of this. Oh, look at that beautiful stone. Oh, it's a stone. But that was it.
So then where did it go from there? Did you keep on carving or did you go back to welding?
Both, both.
Yeah.
I started, typical American, right? Go big or go home. Started making things bigger. The rules of sculpture, right? If you can't make it good, make it big. Had to start making things bigger.
hmm
So that involved going back to welding. Just because then I was able to start to build these structures to support the stones and to
Mm-hmm.
start to combine stones together because stone is so incredibly heavy and it's hard and it's expensive to get a large piece. I was starting to
hmm
make bigger pieces by putting multiples together.
Okay.
And so by welding, I was able to use them as actual framework to put my pieces together and start to go big.
And so then did you do any casting in undergrad?
I did when I was an undergraduate student, I poured bronze for other people a lot, and I poured bronze for myself once, and that was it, and it was enough for me. I actually loved the process of pouring, so I would pour for anybody like
Yeah.
needed stuff poured. I'd be like, I can help. I'm there
Yeah.
to help. I when I was an undergrad, the only process we used for casting was lost wax. And through
Oh,
traditional
invest.
investment.
Okay.
Yep.
Yeah.
Right.
Whew.
So, it, going back to who I am, I should have said this when I introduced myself. I'm pretty impatient. And that's why stone carving probably was a good fit for me
Uh-huh.
because, you're impatient, whack it harder, get a
Oh,
bigger piece off, right?
right.
That working impatient person, like not,
Yeah.
yeah, right? No
Brittle
mesh.
sometimes. Yeah.
So, like I can just remember being like, oh, this is stupid. Like I'm working this wax and I thought I had it perfect and then it all just fell apart, or I got it too warm,
Yep.
and it mushed. And oh, I went to sprue it and I didn't weld it just right with the wax and it all fell apart. All the typical beginner problems
Yeah.
I quickly was like, oh, this is so not for me. I'm going to go back to welding something, and I'm going to go back to carving something where I have like far more control.
Yeah.
And yeah, and also I couldn't afford bronze. So
Hmm.
while we
Yeah.
cast was bronze when I was an undergrad, that's really all we cast. I mean, there was the talk of aluminum, but I don't think anybody ever cast any aluminum. We just cast bronze.
Hmm. I mean, it may be for the best, but that's me projecting my opinion. Aluminum. Sometimes sometimes I'm surprised. That's all I'll say. Some really great artists, I will be surprised by what they can get with cast aluminum. But so moving on, where did that leave us at? Did that leave us with a BFA show in stone and steel, or what did that look like?
Yeah, so my BFA show was primarily stone, but with fabricated steel here and there. And I was really kind of investigating the idea of archways. I was dealing with transitions, right? When you're leaving
Mm,
one
yeah.
thing, you've and I pretty much had stayed close to home. I went to Bowling Green State University and I grew up like 15, 20 minutes away from there. So it was when I was coming to the end of that time, it was this idea of a big transition for me. What
Yeah.
was going to be next? What was happening? I had met Matt during that
Hmm.
time period. He was an undergraduate at Bowling Green State University too. We knew our future was, we had already kind of figured things out because um, when I was leaving undergraduate school, we had already kind of had a plan for what we were going to do next. And it was going to
Hmm.
be together and it was going to be involving Georgia. So, when I was making that body of work, it was about the idea of transitions and it was about the idea of moving from one space to another. And so it was a series of archways, is what my BFA show was.
And is that what well, I don't know how the timing worked. Is that what you then applied to schools with?
Yeah, I had quite a bit of work. I thought it was I thought it was not enough, of course, right?
Mhm.
Like when you're living and breathing it and sleeping on the pallets of plaster for 3 hours in between working, it's
Yeah.
never enough.
No.
But it was actually quite a bit of work. I had probably about 10 or 12 sculptures, and several of them were larger than life size. So, and the smaller ones were, 3 to 5 feet tall. So it was quite a bit of work that I had to apply to grad schools with. So I was pretty lucky. Like I said, Matt and I had a plan, and when we were at Bowling Green as undergraduate students, we knew a friend of ours that was a master's degree student, MFA student in glass, and he was from Georgia. And he actually said to us, he's like, this is crazy. You actually have to go to Georgia. And he's like, it's because you're going to be the stone carver and you're going to be at University of Georgia. And I've poured with George Beasley at Georgia State, and Matt does casting, and he needs to go be with George. And so
Mhm.
that was our plan. Like we looked into stuff and then we decided that's what we were going to do. And both of us only applied to those schools. Like I only applied to one school and he only applied to one school. And we took time off in between undergrad
Mhm.
and grad. Matt
Okay.
graduated undergrad a year before I did. And
Okay.
so he had 2 years off and I took 1 year off in between, and
Mhm.
we worked. He worked much more closely aligned to being an artist. He worked for an artist for those 2 years. I worked at a factory, inspecting some spark plug parts. Like I can remember going through the motion, like turn left,
Wow.
turn right, pull up, pull down, boom, pull up, turn left, turn right. And I'm like, okay, I know I don't want to do this. I know I need to go back to grad school.
Yeah. Yeah. It gives you an appreciation for what you don't have to do. And for people that
Exactly.
are in that type of work, I mean, I have so much respect for people that, can maintain a lifestyle and do that. Cause I like during Ira's interview, Ira Hill, he talked about working at, I can't remember what big car company, but it was doing something with putting together transmissions. And he said it was soul sucking work. And that's
Right.
what I feel like factory work is. My dad worked at a factory during his whole career, the same factory, and he was a technician, but he, yeah, it's hard. But when you got to provide for your family, you do it. And you had to provide for yourself and then try and get into grad school. So you both got in, like the miracle happened, but it
We
doesn't
both got
sound,
it.
yeah.
Yeah.
And so then you're ready to go down. So you moved down to Georgia. And he had already talked about in the interview a little bit that you bought a house halfway
We
between
did.
Atlanta and Athens, Georgia.
Monroe.
Oh,
I
yes.
called it Monroe. Come to find out it's Monroe, like fun. So
Yes.
I learned a lot, moving from Ohio to Georgia. I learned a lot
Yeah.
right away. But yeah, we lived halfway in between. He had the harder commute, no doubt about it. Atlanta traffic versus
I was gonna say
driving
going,
through the country from Monroe to Athens was pretty easy.
yeah, yeah. I was gonna say Atlanta is no joke. We talked a little bit during his interview about there was a little while I worked at a pawn shop in Atlanta and the commute was, I mean, I was living in Athens, but yeah, I quickly stopped because it wasn't the job, it wasn't the people, it wasn't the work, it was just the commute was
The
terrible.
drive.
My gosh, it's like the worst Anyways, let's not talk about traffic. So you go to grad school with a concentration in fabrication and stone carving. And so now by the time I was there was still stone carving, but it was only, I think, like once a semester, or maybe it was a May master class with Kinsey. Did you ever meet Kinsey?
No,
Okay.
I didn't know. Yeah, Horace must have been retired by the time we
Yeah.
were there. Yeah.
Yeah. So then, so then what happened when you were there? Like, what? Tell me
Well,
from the beginning.
I guess lots happened, but
Yeah.
it like just as far as what life happened, what was absolutely crazy is Matt and I moved to Georgia like summer of 97, preparing to go to grad school. We both entered grad school in 1997. So that fall semester or quarter or yeah, whatever it was. I was on quarters. I can't remember if he was on quarters or semesters. Um, and then, like the crazy human beings that we are, we decided to get married like that December, right after starting grad school. So we start, like it's just overwhelming. Like there's this wedding coming up, and I planned nothing of my own wedding, like absolutely nothing. Like I just told my mom, tell me where to show up. Um, and I'm an only child. She loved it. She was like, perfect, yay. I'll tell you where to show up.
Good. Okay.
So we were knee deep in grad school, and that's where I got introduced to cast iron, was actually going to Georgia State. So at UGA at that point in time, Jimbo had already established some sort of iron program. It was very minimal by the time I got there. I think they had poured twice
Okay.
when I got there for grad school. And there was a furnace that Charles Hook had come up and built and run with Jimbo. I think twice. I'm pretty sure it wasn't like two times right in a row. It was like maybe 1 year, and then he came back the next year and ran it with them.
Okay.
So there was iron already introduced at UGA at that point, but it wasn't anything that was a regular basis. It wasn't anything that anybody really knew how to do well at that point in time, or felt comfortable with the process, put it that way. But Matt had already been at Georgia State then for a few months by the time I went to the first iron pour that I went to was at Georgia State and at their courtyard, and Matt was pouring some stuff with some other students there. And so that was my very first introduction. And one thing that when I went to grad school, the big leap in my work, and for me, the big attraction to iron was this whole, I told you how much I hated waxworking.
Yeah.
The whole idea that I could make sand molds, parted
Yeah.
sand molds, ooh, right? Like life changing for me, because all of a sudden, all these forms that I'd been welding in steel, I could make in cast iron, and I didn't have to pay an arm and a leg for bronze.
Uh-huh.
And I could get the look of steel, but
Yeah.
with a more organic form and with a form that didn't involve having the patience to work with wax.
Hmm.
So it was eye opening for me and life changing for me. The medium and the process of sand molds really kind of changed how I approached my work.
So how immediately did that start to like seep into your working um as a grad student?
Immediately, immediately. I would say I'm pretty sure we were on quarters. So my first quarter, I did cast something because I was in a foundry class, and oh my gosh, I'm terrible with names, so I'm so sorry. And you don't have to edit this out. Like it's
Okay.
going to be me trying to remember names, but I think it's Jim Connect
Yep.
was the
Yep.
faculty member,
Yep.
and he
And I-
taught
and
foundry.
I have to say I don't know that because I know that. I mean, I remember Jimbo mentioning that name every once in a while, but it was really from like David Jones and Ashley talking about the people that were teaching when they were there. So anyway, so I know that name because of their interview.
Good.
So
I got it
so
right. So
yes.
he was pretty awesome. Like he didn't know iron, but he was pretty awesome in delivering information about foundry, and he was just Mr. Laid Back, like everything goes. And so I came in and I tried to make a casting. He was like, "Oh, we're going to cast some aluminum," and I cast some aluminum piece. It was garbage. It was just junk. But I tried to do like what I knew, because
Yeah.
everybody goes grad school thinking they're going to do what they know, right? So
Yeah.
I had done wax working, and so I tried to do this wax piece, and it was god awful, and it was aluminum. So, like you said, it was even more god awful because it was
Right.
cast aluminum,
Right.
and it was so bad that like by the time I got done with it, I never even bothered to cut off the screws and vents. And I can remember showing it in some critique, and I think it was Leanne. I think Leanne was there for some reason at our critique. And I think she's like, the most important or the most exciting thing about this are these vents. And I was like, rushed, right? Like, boo.
Oh.
Okay. I mean, not really, because I had nothing invested in the piece. I already knew it was garbage. So, and
Yeah.
a part of me was like, woo, well, I can throw that away, right?
Yeah.
And not feel bad about it. So it was I wouldn't say immediately, like, I see this in all my students too, right? Like that come in for grad school, they're superstars at their undergrad. That's
Yeah.
how you get into grad school. You are a superstar at your undergrad. You want to do the same thing that gave you praise, that gave you,
Yeah.
whatever, set you apart. And,
Hmm.
and guess what? It doesn't always work, right? So big life lesson to
Yeah.
learn. You got to give some stuff up,
Yeah.
and you got to grow, and you got to learn. Um and so it was just good timing that then when I saw the sand molds, because Matt had been doing some sand molds, and we were doing sand molds at UGA too, but far more so at Georgia State. That's
Uh-huh.
pretty much what they did. They didn't have ceramic shell at that time. They didn't
Hmm.
really do much investment at all. It was mostly sand molds. So once I saw that process and realized that my patterns did not have to be wax, like I immediately switched, and it changed my work that very first year. I would say by the time I got done with my first year of grad school, I had made 2 or 3 pieces that incorporated cast iron that were like definitely leading into how I've continued to use the material the rest of my life.
This is very interesting because I feel like what I'm hearing right now, but I'm interested to start a conversation about it, is you were really attracted to the material and the process of the mold making that was introduced to you in the sand mold making, gave you a different kind of more accessible to you handle on the use of the material, and then the price point was also more affordable. But a lot of times people are drawn, I've been finding that people are drawn more to the act of casting, because sometimes at their first pour they don't necessarily have a mold themselves, but it's just like the hive mentality that they want to do it again. And so like what do you, I just said that, like what do you feel that way? Or I
Yeah, definitely. And I've been on a few panels before where I've always been like, well, for me, it was like for my work. Like and don't get me wrong, it's a beautiful show. Who can't get attracted?
Oh
We're
yeah.
flying up, or whatever, bugs to the fire, right?
Right,
But
that's what Ashley says, moths to the flame,
toss to
for
the flame.
sure.
That's it, right? Yeah, absolutely. But I did my undergrad in Bowling Green, like I said, but my minor was in glass, so I kind of
Oh
already had some of that. Like the fire and the flame was already the heat that was already an attraction to me, and
yeah.
um, it still is. I mean, I
Oh yeah.
it's
Yeah.
beautiful. It's
Oh yeah.
fun. It's absolutely fantastic to be with a group, and the energy and the and
Yeah.
the
Oh yeah.
the beauty, the energy, the danger, the camaraderie, whatever.
Yeah.
It's it's all important, and it's all part of it. But for me, the reason I use iron is because it it was a language I was looking for in my work. I didn't know I was looking for it. I knew I did not like working wax. I knew I did not like bronze price point, but also because of the baggage that bronze brings with it. Like,
Hmm.
I felt at that point in time, my 20 something, me, insecure sculpture me. Now I'm just, 50-year-old insecure sculpture me. But, like in my 20s, like I was always afraid what I was making was not good enough for bronze. Right.
Mm-hmm.
So,
I've heard
well,
that too. Yeah.
and part of it is because you do have to pay out so much, but then like, oh, it shouldn't live in bronze forever. Right. Like, so that wasn't part of my language. Bronze was never part of my language. Steel was, the rust was, the
Yeah.
time, the decay, the reality. Like, that's not bronze. Like bronze is illusion,
Yeah.
steel or iron is reality, right? So for me, that's and so for me it was language. That's what drew me to it and kept me in it.
And that I feel like is really, for me, wonderful to hear, because it's changing up. It's making, you are adding to like the, I don't know. I don't know how I want to put it, but it's refreshing for me to hear that, because it's different than what everybody says, and it like sets you apart going forward for the rest of what we're going to talk about, is like establishing it really is about the material. So I guess then what happened next? So we just kind of finished out your first year. So it's a 3-year
Yeah.
program.
No,
And
I was in a 2-year program. It
oh,
was a 2-year
oh,
program then. And
you
thank
know,
God.
I do remember I do remember actually somebody else, an earlier sister or brother of mine, saying that it was 2 years at the, because you would go through the summers. So it was like even more intensive,
Yeah.
but a
Yeah.
shorter year.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Yeah, we made stuff. I don't know if I took classes in the summer. I might have taken like a light course load in the summer, but we
Mm,
definitely were in the studios making all summer long. And
okay.
yeah.
Okay. And so
Yeah.
then where did you go from there? Like just walk me through the rest of the body of work that you were using, how you were using iron, why you were using, like let's just keep going with this.
So so it all kind of fell together for me really, really well. So I went to Georgia to carve stone and was carving
Mm-hmm.
Georgia marble,
Mm-hmm.
um, which, like, I knew I talked a little bit earlier about limestone not being, beautiful stone. Well, Georgia marble is pretty beautiful stone. So, like, I carved a few pieces, and then I realized how beautiful the stone is, and it wasn't like this isn't really what I want. Like, I don't want this beautiful stone. I want
Mm-hmm.
these forms that are made out of stone, um, and referencing the natural world, and to be beautiful, but for you not to be lost in the stone as the viewer.
Mm-hmm.
So,
So the
so
material, let me try and pull the concept, see if I can get it. So you're not the viewer isn't distracted by the material.
right,
Okay.
right. Like, I mean, well, we see statues all the time in museums that are marble, that's polished, that's beautiful, that, like, you're like, oh, the statue's great, but look at that stone, it's beautiful,
Mm-hmm.
right? And that's not what I wanted. That wasn't the language I was looking for. And Horace kind of got that from me. Like, he just understood it. And it's funny because, like, I think back to, I had this huge resource of sculpture faculty there,
Mm-hmm.
and
There
yet
was a lot.
they're doing, yeah, they're doing their own thing. Like, they're researching. And so, like, your time, at least your time, I don't know who I'm talking about as you, but my time, let me just talk about my experience, because that's the only one I know.
Yeah.
My time as a grad student, like, wasn't a lot of time spent with those faculty having heart to hearts. You'd have conversations here and there, but mostly class was like, go make your work, you know.
Mm-hmm.
And so it's pretty amazing. And I get it now that I'm on the faculty side of it. I totally get it. But Horace, like, just understood that. We never had conversations about it. He just kind of understood it. And one day he's like, you need to come out to my studio. And I'm like, okay, I got some stone for you. And I got these pieces of marble for you. So I go out, and he's got these pieces, these blocks, and they're huge. They probably weigh in between like 1,500 to 2,000 pounds a piece. And they are river carved marble. And he was saving them for a special occasion
Yeah.
because the river carving left rust deposits on the
Mm.
stone.
Mm-hmm.
So it's this texture that's been left from nature,
Mm-hmm.
and this color that's been left from nature that happens to be the color of the materials that I'm working with, pairing with my stone. Right. It's rust left on the stone, and I've been working with steel and cast iron to create rust to bleed onto the stones. So he just got that. I don't remember ever having a conversation about it. He just was like, this is what you need. And it was exactly what I needed, like, at that point in my life. So I was making work then that was, um, trying to pair industrial and natural, trying to hold forms together. I think I was just really investigating relationships, and relationships between materials, and relationships between forms, and just the nature of relationships, how they can be helpful, how they can be hurtful, how they can be symbiotic, how they can, be parasitic. There's so many ways that relationships affect all those components. So that's what I was investigating pretty much through my thesis year
Mm-hmm.
and beyond. I mean, I'm nothing ever, like, everything changes and nothing changes, right? It's a lifelong investigation. So
It's like I think I don't know if I've said it while we've been recording, but I definitely before we recorded said like nothing matters, but it's also like everything matters, but nothing matters. But you also get to choose. But then you don't get to choose. Anyways,
right,
we're
right.
getting too deep and we're too shallow at the same time. So so then what happened? You graduate.
Then what happened? Yeah, I got to go to Cortona.
I
So
was wondering about that, but I
I
didn't. I
did.
figured if it came up, then I didn't want to bring it up if you didn't go because I never got a chance to go, but I'm really glad that you
Oh,
did. I mean, things work out and
I
maybe
wasn't going to go. It
what
was crazy.
happened?
I actually was slated to graduate. I had my thesis exhibition. I had my thesis done and ready to turn in. And Horace had, it was either triple or quadruple bypass surgery. And
Oh.
he was slated to teach that summer. And it was probably like April or something when he basically went in for surgery.
Mm,
And he was like, "Oh no, I'm going to teach." And they're like,
mm,
"No, you're not, Horace." Because the sculpture studio at the time, and I think it still is, was like up a hill that was
mm.
about a 20-minute walk up a 45-degree hill, and
Yeah.
they were like, no, Horace, you're not. And he's like, oh, yes, I am. And so they were like, you're coming, because they were like, and I'm like, I can't afford to go. And they're like,
Yeah.
well, you're coming because we can't afford for Horace to have a heart attack on this hill. Well,
Yeah.
he's so stubborn. He was so stubborn, right?
Yeah.
That he did go and he did teach. And I still got to go though, because they wanted somebody to walk up and down with them.
Yeah.
And it worked
Yeah.
out great because Horace really just kind of wanted to go carve stone. And so I kind of taught the class and he just kind of made us work. And I got
Good.
to make plenty of my own work too. So
Good.
that was life changing. And I tell all of my students now and everybody that I meet that like I swore up and down that I couldn't afford to go. And even if it was all paid for, I still couldn't afford to go because it was time not working and it was time, not getting a paycheck and still having rent due and, still having to
Yeah.
pay bills at home and all of that. And the thing is, like, you can't afford not to go. Like, it's just, it's such a temporary in debt thing
Yeah.
for
Yeah.
huge lifelong
Hmm.
kind of reward, so it was
Absolutely.
pretty amazing. Yeah. So then came back and that was that was probably the summer of 1999. And then I had already been involved with Sloss, but that's when the Sloss like became more official.
Hmm.
And Matt and I were both actually while I was in Cortona that summer, Matt was an emerging artist in residence there.
Okay.
And then I came back, I was one there, and we were there, I don't even know, like probably off and on for 2 years as emerging artists in residence, but it wasn't like full time. We didn't live in Birmingham permanently. We
Okay.
would go for 2 or 3 months, and we lived in the photochemical room, which was some artist flat that was in a photography studio, and it smelled
Okay.
like photochemicals. So that was the photochemical room.
Great. But
Yeah.
so this was after you graduated.
Yeah, we were there. We were pretty heavily involved with Sloss before graduating, but after
Okay.
after 99 we were very heavily involved. We were there a lot.
And so you're talking about Sloss Metal Arts.
Yes, sorry.
And
Yes.
no, 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 don't be sorry. No, I just like I will confess, and I think that this is a good time to do it because I feel like right now with you and also a little bit with Matt's story, but we can really kind of tap into however much you want to talk about the development of that program and your experience at the very, very beginning, because I'm going to tell you, and now Sloss has been a fantastic, Sloss Metal Arts has been a fantastic supporter of me and this podcast. But I am going to clear the air and air my dirty laundry. And that when I was in grad school at UGA and we went to the Sloss conference, I didn't know that it was the national conference. Like, I feel like sometimes in my early education, it wasn't detailed that like Sloss Metal Arts is different than Sloss National Historic Landmark, and the national conference is hosted, like all of those little intricacies. I just thought that like the National Historic Landmark had an iron conference every 2 years. And
Well,
like, and
and
that's
you're
probably,
not wrong though. I'm
yeah.
sorry. I got bugs crawling over here. The house was invaded by bugs. So sorry.
No.
But no, you're not wrong because it changed. So,
Okay.
the first conferences at Sloss were the international.
Okay.
And then when Paige Wainwright was there, the international, when they decided to move the international, Paige decided to call the next conference at Sloss the Southern. So it was
Okay.
the Southern Conference for a few times. And
Was that
then,
in the early 2000s or?
no, earlier than that. That
Oh,
was,
okay.
well, maybe, yeah, maybe 99 was still a Southern Conference. 97 was still, were we odd years then? I think we were
Oh,
odd
I have
years
no idea.
then.
And
God
also
almighty.
the actual year dates don't almost matter. because like that can be researched, like that is in the history of Sloss Metal Arts and all of that, blah,
Yeah.
blah, blah. But I'm trying to, for my own education, but also the education of people in my generation or the people that are up and coming, like trying to, you know, fill in the narrative of, so that's interesting to me. And I think I knew at first that it was international. And then, so then it was the Southern.
And then it came back to being, it became the national in
Mm-hmm.
2009. And
Oh, wow.
I'm
That's
like
so late to
really
me.
pretty confident on that one because I chaired that conference.
Yeah.
And when we were planning it, we were like, why are we still calling it? It might have been before that because I was on the committee in
Yeah.
2005, 2007, but I chaired the 2009 one. And somewhere in that time period, I remember Paige and I were like, this is dumb that we're calling it the Southern. This is a
Mm-hmm.
national conference. There are people
Mm-hmm.
coming from all over. And in fact, there were people coming from like 7 different countries. It wasn't
Yeah.
really even national. It was really truly an international conference at that point. But
Mm-hmm.
we didn't want to like steal thunder from the international
No,
conference, right? So
it
it was something different.
and in the end, it doesn't even really matter what
Right.
it's called, because what that conference means to everybody in the community, it doesn't matter the name of the conference. I mean, and
Yeah.
most of us just call it Sloss. And I've just recently started calling it the National just because of my newfound like education streams that I'm getting from the people that have been around longer. And so I'm making more of a distinction with my speak, but it really doesn't matter what it's called. What it matters is the place in the community and how we come together and the timing and what we share. So anyways, so you but let's go back to um you and Matt being resident off and on resident emerging art, was it emerging artists? You didn't use that language.
Emerging artists in
Yeah.
residencies. Called us ears.
Oh no.
Emerging artists in residence. We were the ears.
Okay.
Paige
Okay.
had and we had to go by the title because Paige had received a grant
Okay.
that was specifically for that, and so that paid for us to be there as the ears. So it
When did Paige come into that? Like, and how did that, like, when did she come into that position? Which I know is
oh
very important for basically the continuing of that program for to be what it
before
is.
before I knew Sloss, Paige was there.
Were they
Paige was
having conferences there
yeah.
with, okay,
The first conference at Sloss, Paige was a part of.
okay,
I'm pretty sure it was Wayne and Paige that kind of brainstormed,
yeah.
with a few other
Oh, yeah,
folks in there.
for
But
sure.
yeah, right. But Paige was part of it from the very beginning, the first conferences at Sloss.
Okay.
Um, and she was amazing at grant writing and kind
Mm-hmm.
of as for being a non-artist, she
Mm-hmm.
had incredible vision for an arts program. So and she self-declared non-artist, like
Yeah.
but she had an amazing vision, and she she did some fantastic grant writing that helped get things off its feet and moving forward.
And one of those things involved you and the other ears.
That's right.
That's that could be your band name.
Us
Oh my
ears at the
goodness.
time. And there were the resident artists there at the time were Eric Johnson and Alan Peterson,
Mm-hmm.
and they were amazing. They were fantastic, and they were like the second set of visiting art, or not visiting artists,
Mm-hmm.
resident artists that had been at Sloss at that point in time. And so
Mm-hmm.
um that's when I got introduced to it, when it was
Mm-hmm.
all dirt, no concrete. And we would lose tools in the dirt all the time. And we weren't allowed to dig holes because it was a National Historic
Yep.
Landmark. So you
Mm-hmm.
could bury a mold, you couldn't do anything. But that's where I got involved with Sloss and fell in love with Sloss. And yeah, spent
Yeah.
many, many days in the sand.
Yeah. And years afterwards, facilitating those conferences. Yeah. So do you have any stories that you want to kind of reminisce about, or I
Oh,
don't know.
probably too many. Probably a few good ones that all involve Eric Johnson. One is I can remember, gosh, I don't even remember what we were doing.
Doesn't matter.
Something on
That's like how every good story
something on Yeller.
starts.
Yeller was the furnace that was there, and Yeller is at RIT now. When
Oh,
Yeller went
okay.
off production, Yeller was the furnace that was the big furnace that was there for many years before they got the whiting
Okay.
and before the Timmy furnace, which I don't even know what's still there anymore. Man, I'm like
Doesn't matter.
touch now. But anyways, the Yeller furnace is the furnace that we poured with, and we tried to pour with many times, and it always got kind of ran, but always like ran us ragged
Mm.
when we were running it.
Was it because
But
it ran so fast or because it took so long to get through or what or both or
it we part of it was just the learning curve of us, and I say us, but we were led by Eric at that point
Mhm.
in time, and Eric loved to change variables every time. Every time
Oh.
we poured, he would change a variable. So one day we would run it with three blowers. One day we would run it with one blower and one clear. One day we would put the pipe on it and run it with one blower with the pipe. And I mean, like every time we ran it, we changed a variable. And so we had to learn, what that variable did. And it was a great learning curve. We
Oh
learned a lot
yeah.
doing it that way. But yeah, it just it's still today though. We don't change variables anymore. We pretty much run it with one Dayton blower. and,
Yeah.
yeah, but
So you
it's
didn't know what
still,
you were doing, but it was something with Eric.
yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, I was going back to my story. Sorry, see?
Yeah.
I can get lost. We were fixing the furnace, and it was before we were running. We were fixing something on the furnace, and I don't even know if it was bottom door or whatever, but I'm sure we were changing some variable, and we lost literally every wrench we had in the dirt. Like we would take a wrench over. I need a wrench. And then he'd set it down and it would be gone because the
Just
sand, just the burn up foundry sand would just go poof and it would be gone. And yeah, so and it was back in the day where we didn't have a lot of tools. So,
yeah.
the whole three wrenches that were in the Sloss tool cage were all lost in the dirt. And so we were done for the day because we didn't have any money to go buy another wrench. So we had to wait till the office opened the next day to go beg somebody for money to go buy a
By
wrench.
a wrench. Yeah, that is like the bare bones beginnings. Wow.
So that's one story. Another story, and maybe Matt told this story, I don't know, but Matt Eaton was there as an ear the same summer as Matt and I were there as ears this time. And I was teaching some class in Atlanta at a community arts center like twice a week. And so I would have to drive from Birmingham back to Atlanta, go teach a class, and then drive back to Sloss.
Oh
And we
my.
were getting ready for an iron pour the next day. And Eric had a big mold that he had to bury, and we couldn't bury anything at the time. And so he had to wait till after, you know, I'm saying this and maybe this gets edited out, but I don't know, but I think it could be good. So we had to wait till after 5 o'clock because they can dig holes now, I think. So anyways,
Okay.
we had to wait till after 5 o'clock to dig this hole to put this mold in, right?
Okay. Yeah, yeah.
So we didn't have any concrete. And so driving a forklift, we had to use what we called the yellow brick road, which was sheets of plywood.
Okay.
And
Oh, I'm familiar with this. Yeah.
right. So you laid the sheets of plywood so that the forklift could drive the heavy molds over the
Yeah.
over the dirt. Well, so he dug his hole and he's driving the forklift with no brakes
Right. I've heard about that. Mm-hmm.
on the yellow brick road and drove the forklift right into the
Oh,
hole because of the brakes. All this happened right when I left Birmingham to go to Atlanta. That's when
oh.
he drove that's when he drove the forklift into the holes, like right after I left. So this is like long before cell phones, right?
Yeah.
Like, once you're gone, you're out
You're
of
gone.
contact. No,
Yeah.
um, so I get back like 6, 8 hours later, and I'm like, what the hell? You guys are like in the same exact position as when I left.
Because you didn't know.
And they all just look at me and they're drinking, of course, right? They're drinking beer and they all just look at me and they're like, and I'm sure like the whole time they're like, Biz is gonna get back here and she's gonna be like, you guys have done nothing. And so I get back there and I'm like, you guys have done nothing. And they're like, you're like, you don't even know the number of come-alongs that we've had to
Oh,
use, like, right? Like,
oh my gosh.
and the other forklift that they weren't supposed to drive, they had to get the forklift that really wasn't Sloss Metal Arts. It belonged to something else that had a key left
Mhm.
in it.
Ooh.
This was a long time ago. All
Oh yeah.
parties. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, this is this is what we call on the podcast water under the bridge.
Right.
It's just a
Right.
good
So
story. And Sloss
just a
Metal,
good story.
yeah, everything survived. The hole got filled in.
The hole got
So
filled in.
nobody
Yeah.
knew. Nobody was
Nobody knew.
yeah,
All good.
yeah. That's a good no, Matt didn't tell that story though.
And the mold did pour.
That's good. I was wondering, but I was afraid to ask because I didn't want to.
The mold did pour. And I think it might have been the hook. Eric had a piece that was, I don't know where it is now. It was up at Sloss for a long time after he passed away still. And it was a tripod piece that was maybe
Mm,
like 14 feet tall that had a big cast iron hook that hung from the center of it. And I
okay.
think it was that hook that we were
Wow.
casting that day or the next
Wow.
day, or it might have been 2 days after that, after all that. I
Yeah.
can't remember. I just remember coming back and being like, and they were like, don't start.
Yeah. We don't want to hear it from. Yeah. That's a good story. That's a good one for the books. So then so at this point, are you living in Birmingham now or are you still staying in the photochemical room?
Photochemical room. We never moved to Birmingham.
Okay.
We just
Okay.
would go and stay for weeks at a time in the photochemical room, then go back to
Yeah.
Georgia for a while, then go back and
Mm-hmm.
back and forth and back and forth for a while.
And so then how long was that? How long did you do that for?
I think 2 summers,
Okay.
if I'm recalling right. The ears were like a specific summer program.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, I think the first year Matt was there much longer because I was in Cortona the
Yeah.
first year. He
Yeah.
was there the whole summer. I was there part of it. And then the next summer we were both
Mhm.
there. Yeah.
Mm. So then after that, what happened?
After that, gosh, my memory, right? I don't know. In 2000, yeah, it must have been right after that. So that was the summer of 2000. And I can remember being in the foundry and everybody was like, it was kind of like the end of an era for us. We had been at Sloss for a couple years off and
Yeah.
on, maybe
Yeah.
like 3 years off and on,
Yeah.
pretty hard. And there were a lot of tears the end of that summer because that's when Matt got a job going back to Bowling Green State University. So he went back, got a full-time visiting position there. And Eric was taking a teaching position in South Carolina, I believe, is where he was going. Um, and it was kind of like a lot of goodbyes. It was like, oh,
You
we're all
knew.
leaving, and it was all very sad, like as you're
Yeah.
standing in the dirt, like exhausted because you can't find the wrenches you dropped, but like also realizing how much you're going to miss that dirt.
Yeah. There's like a bittersweetness to that sort of
Right, right,
realization.
right. The realization that you can't do that forever, but
Yeah.
that you just want to do that forever, right?
Yeah. 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 And so then you moved with Matt back to
I
Bowling
moved
Green?
with Matt. Yeah, we went to Bowling Green. I taught adjunct there for a year, and then I got a job in Nebraska.
Mm-hmm.
And so I ended up going to Nebraska. Matt taught another year at Bowling Green, then he moved to Nebraska too.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And so then were you still, I feel like I already kind of know the answer, but just for the story, the sake of the story, were you still in the iron casting community in Nebraska?
Yeah. So when I went to Nebraska, they had zero iron.
Mhm.
In fact, they hadn't really poured a lot of metal, period, but they had just built a foundry, and I got to kind of finish out the rest of the foundry because it was just a new space when I moved there.
Mhm.
So I got a little bit of a say. I didn't get in soon enough to get full say of everything about how the foundry ran, but I got a lot of say in kind of finishing things out. And so we had a courtyard,
Mhm.
excuse me, and built a small furnace. And in fact, I moved there in 2001. Yeah. Sorry.
No, it's okay. I mean,
Memory, not that great anymore.
well, but it's
And
also
then
like that was a long time ago.
it was a long time ago. It doesn't seem like it was that long ago,
Ugh.
but sometimes, and then other times it's like a lifetime ago.
Yeah.
But yeah, we actually we built a furnace to go. That's right. We built a furnace to go to Nebraska. So Matt had built a furnace that is named Dante in Bowling Green,
Mhm.
and it was pretty big. I remember, maybe a 14-inch.
Yeah.
It's now in New
Yeah.
Mexico. David Labdell has it in New
That's it.
Mexico. And
Okay.
yeah,
I'm gonna I'm going to Iron Tribe. So I'll
nice,
see it.
nice.
That
It's
yeah.
been there for quite a while. It's been there since 2006, I think. So yeah.
I just
Hopefully I think it's still in production. He sends us videos every once in a while with it.
I
So
bet. I bet. I just it's funny because when you were talking about like financing Cortona and like don't worry about the money because like that's kind of how I feel about going to New Mexico and Iron Tribe. Is like I've always wanted to go for probably since I found out about it maybe 10 years ago. And I had a ride at one point. And I didn't take it
mm,
because I was working too many part-time jobs and I couldn't if you don't work you don't get paid and I didn't I always have regretted it and this year I was like, you know what? Just that's just why I have a credit card. And it's probably like bad role modelist of me, but sometimes you just got to buy the tickets and then you'll pay them
sometimes you
off.
just gotta buy the ticket. Yeah,
Yeah.
right.
Yeah. Anyway, so maybe I'll see Matt's
I
furnace.
know. I
So
know.
anyway, but that's not the one that you built to go to Nebraska.
No, Matt had built that. Actually, when we went back to Bowling Green, he built it just basically to run there. And
Hmm.
they had not done really much of any iron at Bowling Green. Like they didn't do anything when we were there as undergrads. And from the time
Right.
we left till when we came back, I think there had been somebody that did a little bit, but not much. And
Okay.
so the students there were all hungry for it. And so Matt built a furnace and got it all working and found a place to pour and basically set up an iron program there. With that furnace. And then when I got the job in Nebraska, gosh, I don't think we built. I'm trying to remember why we built the second furnace. I think we built it to specifically to take to Nebraska,
Okay.
to take to the school, but we also were doing a community pour in Missouri that same summer, like on my way to moving to Nebraska. We had something that summer, and I think that we might have built that furnace to take to that community pour because Dante was way too big. It was just not a good not a good transport
Hmm.
furnace. So
Yeah, I mean that
built
big,
one
yeah.
that was probably the best furnace we ever built. And it was probably the one that Matt and I truly built together. Like normally Matt's the builder. Like he's really, really good at all that stuff. And he's an engineer and he's super smart. And you know, I'm like, okay, fine, you can take the lead and just tell me where I can help. And
Hmm.
every once in a while I have a little gold nugget that I can
Yeah.
throw in there that makes it into the final design. But this one, like I feel like we actually did everything together. Like it was a true like collaboration on this furnace. And um I forget I think it was a 12-inch,
Hmm.
and it was the best running furnace ever. It really was. And so we took that to Nebraska and we ran that with students, and it was great because it was a great size to run. We could tap out anywhere from like 75 to 225 pounds. So it had huge range, like,
Wow.
right,
Yeah.
what you could pour with it. It was easy. Like we ran it with 3 people often.
Hmm.
Um,
Hmm.
you know, Matt and I being 2 of them, I
Yeah.
wouldn't run it with myself and 2 students, but
Right. Yeah.
it was pretty easy to run, unlike Yeller, like I said, that like just kills everybody. It kills a crew of 10 for some reason, but this furnace was very easy to run. So we had that in Nebraska, and I had some students that really, really loved it, like just absolutely loved it. It was fun going to Nebraska. I had a lot of students that were first time, like in their families going to college. And it was hard for them to kind of reconcile being in art, and being the first family member to go to college and being in art. And so that was, I think, a struggle for a lot of students to kind of, like, this is my passion. This is not my parents' dream. And, there's a lot of parents' dream in me being
Yeah.
here. Um,
Yeah.
but they were very passionate about the process, and they were hardworking. Oh my God, I had some hardworking students, in
Mhm.
Nebraska. And so I had a lot of fun with those students there. I had a lot of fun, and they would travel with me. They went to Sloss. They went to Glass Art Society conferences in Seattle. So
Yeah.
yeah, it was a good time there.
I had a question and I forgot it. It doesn't even really matter, but oh, I guess I was like just hearing you talk about you and Matt bringing iron to all of these schools. I know that it's really important in your practice as an artist, and um I just was wondering, why is it so it seems like it's really important to you also to share it with students and go out of your way to build a furnace to be able to provide this new like form of material for students to use. Is there like, can you pull out like why that is for you and Matt?
I think that I think that for me, it really was material driven.
Mm-hmm.
But like we talked about, there's that energy, right? And I
Mm-hmm.
think that when you're trying to reach students, that idea of that community and that energy is pretty important.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And that coming together and that networking. I used to remember a faculty member used to be like, "You need to network, 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 network," right? Like that's, and I just hated that because I am not a networker. I'm not
Yeah.
good at that. Like, I mean, I'm just not. It's not in my nature. If I had to sell stuff to like
Yeah.
live, I'd be done. I mean,
Yeah,
so
I'm with you. I'm with you on that. Like, unless it's something I believe in, then
right, then it's easy,
then I'm
right?
like, here's the Kool-Aid. But if it's not something that I can honestly back, I can't sell it. So anyway, so I'm with you on that. So,
Right.
but you
But
could
in a
sell the
way,
iron.
like you do need a community. And like community is a good word to me and networking is bad wording, but it's kind of the same thing, right? It's
Yeah.
just, you need that community. And I think that it's a great way for students to build a community, to realize how they can rely on each other, and also to learn their own strengths. I think that for me, it was pretty important for me to get the whole student body participating. Like,
Yeah.
it doesn't matter your size, your frame, your gender, your background, like, whether you're an athlete, whether you're not, like, you can participate and
Hmm.
you can contribute to this end goal. And so that building of community, I think, was really important for me when I was teaching.
Hmm.
Um, when I was early teaching, like when I was back in Nebraska, and when I was teaching in Ohio and even teaching in Georgia, I feel like that was really important for me to build that.
Hmm.
As my teaching has progressed and as I've been teaching longer and longer, I still think that that's important, but I think that it's evolved. And I'm trying to put this into words, and I don't really know if I even fully understand it. But there was a point about maybe 10 or 12 years ago where I had a grad student that was completely new to like making anything with tools, materials, like had done sculpture, came in for sculpture, but like easy stuff, right? Like wire
Yeah.
and like stuff that you can do in your apartment and you're not going to get
Yeah.
hurt. You're not going
Yeah.
to breathe toxic fumes and,
Yeah.
like never welded, had never done anything remotely dangerous. And
Mm-hmm.
used to come in and like, I called them ballet slippers, but they weren't ballet slippers. Like that's what, like, and I'm just like, oh my gosh, I cannot even look at your foot attire. Right. But this was the student that came in um, and then really kind of got intrigued with the idea of casting and like
Okay.
for his work, like
Okay.
not falling in love with the process, like
Yeah.
falling in love with it for his work. And I can remember setting him up to fail and everybody looking at me going, you are just setting him up to fail. And I'm like, I know. And I'm like, it was like really, this sounds terrible, like as I'm describing it. But
It does at this
it
point,
right,
but
like
there's going to be a turn, right?
he wanted
Okay.
to make this mold and it was this long flat mold. And he was just like in his ballet slippers, right? Just had no idea how to do this. And so
Yeah.
I gave him all the instructions
Yeah.
and I was like, you need to do this on your own. And they're like, he's never going to be able to do it on his own. I'm like, that's the point. Like, I feel like that, like, and they're like, oh, that's so mean. I'm like, is it, or is it like, I'm like, I don't think it is. I think that this is a huge learning moment to like understand not only the process, but your own capabilities. Like,
Yeah.
and it's okay to not be able to do it all on your own. Like
Oh, yeah.
you're right. Like it's not some, I don't know, it's not this badge of honor, like I made this mold all by myself. Like, okay, well, I made the same mold with 12 people and I got done faster, like whatever.
Yeah.
But he made the mold and it failed miserably. And then I
Okay.
spent 2 days helping him fix it.
Okay.
And he learned so much, so
Yes.
much in that. And we poured the piece, and it was going to be a terrible piece to begin with. I mean, I'm not using any names here. So
It's fine. It's all
it
fine.
was. And the student, and it got done, and the student's like, oh yeah, this totally didn't work out like I wanted it. Yeah, and I'm like, yeah, I kind of knew that anyways, but I kind of wanted you to go through it all.
Yeah.
And then after this huge failure,
Yeah.
this student went on and made like 50 super successful molds and these amazing castings that were in the thesis show. Like,
Yeah.
so I don't, I mean, I'm like setting myself up to take credit for that. And I'm not, but
No.
that was like where I had like a shift in my teaching, like where it was like, you know what? Sometimes the teaching is not teaching how to do it right. Sometimes the teaching is the teaching of um, understanding when it's going to go wrong or how to fix it once it goes wrong. And, the idea of failure, we all talk about it. It's vital to growth as an artist,
Yes.
right?
Yes. And that is a reoccurring theme in these interviews and it's usually about furnaces, but
Right, right.
people will say you learn more from a failure than a success and you grow more from a failure than a success. And it seems like this student maybe was playing it safe when he came in or when they came in, and you were able to help them learn more by kind of letting them be
Hopefully
independent
that,
at first. Yeah.
hopefully that, or I'm just totally mean, but
But it
it
sounded
might be a
like
little bit of both.
it sounded like that's what that student needed though. And so being able to see what each individual student needs instead of teaching the mass the same thing, that is a gift. And sometimes you might have to be the bad guy, just like sometimes the parents have to be the bad guy. But in the end, the child learns how to behave in society through those hard lessons. Hard love.
Right, right.
Right.
but yeah, I think that that's just one example, but my teaching has changed. I guess that
Well, but
I don't know, but
your
that's
role has
yeah, my role
changed
has changed too.
too.
Yeah, yeah. So yeah, it's not so much over the years I've gone from teaching techniques and
Hmm.
teaching concepts that go with those techniques to then teaching graduate students where you're dealing with, like, okay, here's the how to actually do it, but yeah, let's really talk about the why, like,
Hmm.
and then moving into, now my role is why art in academia, even, so it's even a bigger, broader question that,
Yeah.
yeah,
But
has several and no answers all at once.
oh, well, exactly. I mean, I kind of feel like that might be the theme of everything and nothing.
Right.
But it's also like every single person, art student or anybody, as we grow and learn and evolve, we need different things at different times. And students need young, fresh, hip teachers, that just came out of grad school themselves and they've got all this energy and they're working on their body of work and they're, gunning for tenure. But then I have to say some of my most uh impactful undergrad my most impactful professors that I had in undergrad were the ones that were more experienced, had more life experience under their belt, had more teaching, time to relax into their own practice, and so that energy helped me be more comfortable with who I was because I wasn't always trying to keep up with this like grad student teacher or first year visiting lecturer. It's like whatever. This is like kind of what I've been kind of noticing that whatever place that somebody I'm interviewing is at, there's probably tenfold people that you're in their lives and they need you to be exactly who you are right now. And you don't even know it. And so it sounds like ballet slippers probably like they needed you to be that person because probably nobody else was going to be that person to them. And they probably learned more from that experience than you'll ever know. For we'll never know the impact of it, but
It's so funny. I can
like
just envision the broken mold right now on the floor.
I was talking to I can't remember who I was talking to. I once helped somebody cast a sword.
We all have.
Everybody's helped somebody cast a sword. And if you're listening and you've cast a sword, it's fine. It's fine.
Like,
It's just
like
funny.
I said, we all have, right?
We all have. Like another interview I did, somebody said, everybody has cast a bone or two. And it's like, yeah, that also. I was gonna say something else. And then there was somebody that I can't remember exactly who it was, but it I there's this thing, like there's nothing like a inexperienced caster making a mold. And they tell you what they want to do, and you're like, wow, good luck. I wouldn't try that. I wouldn't try
And somehow pull it off, and you're like, wow, I learned so much.
uh, or I'll think maybe I should be more relaxed in my mold making because I'll look at that and I'll be like, I don't know, man, that's ceramic. That's never going to release from the mold. Or like I've seen somebody make a mold of a snapping turtle shell, and the snapping turtle shell wouldn't release from one side of the mold. And we had to break it was like a 200-pound side. And we had to smash it and then put it in put it in the side that had released and like redo the undercuts so that it would release. And so the more experience you have, it's like almost like sometimes the more jaded I become. Like I would never try and make a mold that I didn't think would work, but it's like what possibilities am I eliminating myself from because I have lost that you know novice mold making. I
And
don't
you know
know.
what? I mean, I feel like I was there like 15, 20 years ago. Like there was a right way and a wrong way, right?
Mm-hmm.
And
Mm-hmm.
then I don't know if it's just like more time teaching where you see all these, like you're saying, like all the things that are never supposed to work. Like
Yeah, the
I've
miracle
got way
molds.
more chill, like again, like you start off loosey goosey, right? You start off
Yeah.
like, oh, I don't know anything, I don't know better. It's all gonna work, right? So
Yeah.
try it. It's all gonna work. And then you learn the right way. And you're like, oh, it's gotta be this way, and da 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 da
Yeah.
da da. And then you do it enough times or you see it enough times that, and I don't care if this is about making molds, teaching art, running a furnace, like whatever, right? Like the size of
Yeah.
your Coke, it could be anything, right?
Yeah.
So you see it work enough times that it works, like back to loosey goosey, and you're like, well, heck, let's just try it,
Whatever. Yeah. Throw a
right?
brake rotor, full brake rotor in there. It'll be fine. And it is. And then sometimes it's not.
And then
Uh,
sometimes it's not. You have to go back to the drawing board and like,
you're
oh
like,
yeah, okay, let's go back to what we know.
yeah, or like I should have known better. I remember helping, it was with Allison and Noah. I helped them with one of their like 6 mile conferences. And they were like, if you could really just like help people make their, simple parted molds. I was fresh out of grad school and I was just excited that somebody trusted me with something. And so, but this woman came in from the local community college and she had this ceramic form of like she had made it, but it was based off of like kind of like a primitive female, voluptuous form. And so we rammed a 2-part and it like the same thing that I was talking about with the stupid snapping turtle shell. Like one side just didn't want to, it's always the first side that you ram. It just doesn't want to release. And I was like, well, just smash it. And she was like, because that was her art. And I was like, no, this is the pattern. Why would you ram something in sand that's that important to you? And so it was like I had never taught like I had taught like metalsmithing but never foundry, and so like it was just very eye-opening to me. And so I ended up having her take like a nail or like a spade bit and carve around over and over and over again until eventually it did release. And like we probably didn't put enough parting dust on it or whatever, but it was a bad situation. And I was like, I want to die right now. I just want to crawl into a hole and die because when I was like, well, just smash it out. She looked at me like, uh,
Not
like
an
the horror that I would suggest that we smash her art. And, I was like, I don't know if I'm cut out for this. And then of course, though, I think it had like, because of the carving and carving and carving, it had kind of like
Oh,
the,
extreme flashing.
but it was like to her, she was like, it's a halo. And I was like, that's exactly what it is. It's a halo. The eye of the beholder and all that. But anyways, so what made you leave Nebraska?
The job here made me Nebraska. It was hard. It was a really hard decision. I was at a little school. It was University of Nebraska at Kearney, and I was the sole sculpture and glass faculty. And like I said, I had some fabulous students there, and I really liked it. And we had an incredible studio. It was amazing. We had one building that was just steel fabrication with stone carving outside. This was Matt's and my individual studio at our house. Like, and
Oh,
then we had another building that was just wax working. And then primarily for Matt, because I still don't really like working with wax.
I don't blame you. I don't either. I don't. But
And then
anyways.
we had, yeah, and then we had one building that was just for horses. And then we had one
Oh,
building that was
yeah.
the foundry. And it had a kiln inside, and it had Dante, that furnace, and a jib crane and everything. We had set up a lot there. So it was hard. It was probably the hardest thing ever, like decision for us to leave. But it was a long ways from everything. It was Kearney, Nebraska was a long drive to wherever,
Yeah.
wherever you needed to go. And we had friends that went to RIT,
Mm-hmm.
for their MFA. And so we had known about it, and the job came open, and I wasn't looking to leave UNK. I really wasn't. And the job came open, and I read it, and I was like, wow, that really, this was back in the day when it was still in print. Like I said, they had the little booklet,
Yeah.
and I took it to Matt, and I'm like, this kind of sounds like me. And
Yeah.
he read it, and he's like, yeah, it kind of sounds like you. And so I applied and got the job. And it's been good. I really love RIT. I mean, it's still like when I think of our studio in Nebraska, like it makes me really sad because our studio here is not
Mm-hmm.
even like a tenth of what it was there. And it was just
Yeah.
because there were outbuildings on the property that and we were young and we had energy and we
Yeah.
could do,
Oh, yeah.
um,
Yeah. And it was
but
probably a lot less expensive.
a lot less expensive. A lot.
Anyways. Yeah.
Yeah. But RIT is an amazing place to be. It really is. I mean, I've been here since 2006 now, and I can't imagine going anywhere else. It's a great school. It's a great community. There's a lot of people that are really, really good at what they do, and I have phenomenal students here too. So I mean, they're probably everywhere. So I mean, it's not that I've just gotten lucky, but there's some really great students.
So what can you tell me a little bit about the program? Like, so say, because I'm sometimes people will ask me where I went to grad school because they are in undergrad in iron and they're looking for grad schools. And I say, well, the place that I learned iron at the University of Georgia, they don't pour iron anymore. So if you're interested in either leaning into iron casting or concentrating in iron casting, the University of Georgia, unfortunately, isn't. If it has other strengths right now, but iron casting is not one of them. And so for people that are listening to the podcast that are maybe undergrads, like would RIT be something they could like look into for grad school?
Absolutely. Yeah, we've had a lot of people come. We've had students come from Mary Bates program in Arizona. We've
Mm-hmm.
had students come from, where has everybody come from?
Oh, it doesn't matter. Like it doesn't matter.
Yeah, like
I want to talk more
all,
about like what
yeah,
the program would offer them.
yeah. So we don't pour iron all that much right this moment.
Mm-hmm. Well,
And that's
also that's
yeah, kind of because
yeah.
I've moved out of that role. But
Oh,
one of
but
our
also the
alumni,
pandemic. Like a lot
oh
of
yeah,
people,
right,
like they haven't even if they don't pour iron a lot at their schools, like they haven't had access to it from community events and conferences. So that's kind of across the board.
right,
But
right. But we have two furnaces. So like I said, we have Yeller that used to be at Sloss.
mhm.
When that went offline, it got you a lot of people will probably remember it sitting down at the bottom of shed number 2. It sat down there for probably 5 to 10 years after it got moved out of production.
Mhm.
And so I bought that. Well, I didn't buy it. RIT bought that. Oh gosh, I don't even remember now. 2010 maybe we bought
Okay.
that furnace
Yeah.
and brought it up. And it's a fabulous furnace. It runs great. It taps out between like 3 and 500 pounds depending on how we lay the bed and where we,
Jeez.
you know,
Yeah.
what slagger we go up to. So we can cast pretty big with it. And then we have
Mhm.
another student built furnace from 2011 that went to the student built competition, and the student left it, and it's a
Mhm.
fabulous little furnace that we can tap out smaller amounts. And so we pour quite often. We've had a lot of students do a lot of cast iron in their thesis shows. So it's a great school to come to, not just because of the cast iron. It's just
Mhm.
because cast iron is one component.
Oh yeah.
We have, again, I'm director for School of Art and School for American Crafts. So we have MFAs in glass that students
Mhm.
a lot of times go back and forth. I mean,
Mhm.
it's the fire. We're all attracted by the fire, right?
Yeah.
And heat in
Yeah.
the process. But there's a lot of similarities in casting glass that kind of go back and forth. And in our metals and jewelry design program is actually really strong too. And so they have a large trip hammer right next to our um, non-ferrous foundries. So there's a lot of crossover, and
Oh
there's
good.
a lot of collaboration. So it's a great school. I tell people, it's what's nice is if you want to come visit, we're only an hour from Alfred, so you can come and see
Mm.
two of the schools that are casting iron and get a feel for how each school kind of works. And
Oh yeah,
yeah,
that's a really great idea.
you
Yeah.
can
And
fly
I
into Alfred, they fly into Rochester anyway. So I
yeah,
tell people, come check us both out. And like, we're not that far from Syracuse either, which is another great MFA program. So, if you fly in and you want to look at grad schools, you can go to three pretty awesome programs all within a day's drive of each
yeah,
other.
in one trip. And that
Yeah.
you don't get very often. So
Yeah.
that's
Yeah.
a really good pointer. And I have to this is like a personal thing, but so my undergrad professor went to grad school at RIT.
Oh, yeah.
So yeah, her name is Susan Hamlet, and she, I went to UMass Dartmouth, and so, but I always had really high perception of RIT from the metalsmithing lens for like forever, because also Albert Paley taught there,
Yep.
and
He's still associated with RIT. He is.
yeah.
I just saw him last week. I just
Oh
saw him.
wow.
Yeah.
Like to just be a fangirl for a second. Oh my gosh.
So I've had a lot of students an alumni that have worked for him in his studio. He just recently retired,
Wow.
and closed his studios down in
Yeah.
Rochester. But he's working. We're working right now to get his archives at RIT. So
Yeah.
he kept amazing records. Every commission he has, like, from the very first letter of, like, asking him to, like, would he be interested in making something for this particular place or whatever, to all of the materials, to bidding it out, to hiring the concrete work and the everything. He has records like this for every piece that he's ever made.
Wow. That's
Yeah.
amazing. What a resource. I mean,
Yeah.
like, come on. I remember when I moved to St. Louis, and so he has gates in St. Louis that are kind of like by the zoo. But the first time that I went around, I was in somebody else's car, and I recognized the gates from a book that I had checked out of the library when I was in undergrad, because I was like really inspired by him in undergrad. And I almost about jumped out the window because I had remembered the piece. But like when you grow up in Massachusetts, like I didn't know where St. Louis, it's like all these different things in different places. And I have a better idea of the layout of the land now that I live in Missouri. But, I just was surprised by it, and also like saw it in person. And yeah. So anyway, so that was even before I knew you. And then knew that you worked there. I always had a really high opinion of the school. So
That's awesome. It's a great school. It
yeah.
really, really is. Yeah, I don't just say that because I have to, but I mean, I live it, and I enjoy being there. It's a
Good.
great place to be.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I mean, I don't know how many people at this point are listening to this podcast, or like if it's anybody outside of Iron Cast, people are already in the community. But I do feel like I want to start to, as I'm interviewing all of these professors or people that are in administration at different colleges, try and capture a little bit to maybe help out undergrads that are in our community looking to go to grad school. And not everybody wants to concentrate in iron casting, but maybe they just want to have it be available, but also be able to experiment with different materials that maybe they weren't exposed to in undergrad. And so it sounds like RIT is a really good resource for that and for many other things. So
It really is. I won't go on and on, but there's this one class that I still want to take someday. We
yeah.
have an underwater cinematography studio class.
Oh
Like, you have
wow.
to learn how to scuba dive first, and then you get to go make movies underwater. Like,
With
that's
underwater cameras.
yeah.
That's insane.
Yeah.
That sounds really cool. I mean, I hope someday.
I know.
Someday.
Someday I'm going to take that class.
Absolutely. And I do remember some of your work being film based. I remember at Sloss, it was before you were the because in 20 I feel like it was in 2019 you were the keynote uh, speaker, but in maybe it was like in 2015, you showed a piece with a projection of horses on the
Yep.
wall. Yeah.
Yep. I remember you helping me with it. Yeah.
Oh, Sloss, right?
Yep.
Mhm. And so let's go to what's hot on the horizon before I completely like lose my all of my energy because I'm feel like I'm starting to wane. So we got anything hot on the horizon?
Hot on the horizon is we are actually going to be pouring iron soon, which is like pretty amazing for us because, like you said, it's been a dry spell, right? We
For
used to pour
yeah.
all the time at RIT, and then the pandemic, and
Hmm.
then yeah, just life. And so we actually have Noah and Allison Kirby coming in November, and we're going to be doing an iron pour with them in
Awesome.
November. So we're pretty excited.
Yeah, and through with the school are
With
and
the school
is
at RIT. Yeah, they're going to come as visiting artists and give a lecture, and we're having a workshop. And yeah, we have a fabulous group of graduate students right now that really want to learn the process, and
Mhm.
so we're really excited to be able to do it.
That's awesome. And is it just kind of RIT focusing with the students, or is it like gonna be are people from Alfred gonna be coming out to help or
Probably not. We're just
okay.
focusing we're just focusing on the students right now here at home. And so,
Yeah.
the
And
whole
there's
COVID restrictions and the opening up, and like it's navigating things all the
yeah,
time. So
yeah.
I think right now we're not quite to that open door policy yet.
And you know what? I feel like there's so many different iron pours that are available that are like, come on out and help. And we've got Sloss coming up in April and stuff like that. But there is something about just having a home front pour with just your like immediate family and what Allison and Noah can bring to like I don't want to say controlled environment because I feel like that sounds like a
No,
negative
but it needs to be a
connotation.
teaching environment,
But yeah, I
Yeah.
mean it's like that's a different type of experience for students too. And sometimes it could be like better for them, you know. And then
Yeah.
those other conferences are there
Right.
when
The
it's
chaos
time.
can ensure in the
Yeah.
future.
Yeah. But that's so fantastic. I'm very happy to hear that and
It is good.
have have a great time.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you.
So now we're at the point where we talk about maybe if you have a little advice for the community, for peers, for students. It's really like, you know, anything that you feel like you've learned through the process or oh,
Um, if I think back to, the past however many years, 26 years or so that I've been casting
mhm.
iron now, I guess my advice is to like just do it.
Yeah.
Like really, that's it. Like just do it. And I think that we've kind of touched on this a little bit before, like that idea of like, you don't know any better, so you do it, and then like you follow the rules, and then like you come back out of that and you're just kind of like, well, some of the rules just don't matter, and you just do it. I think that what I've kind of learned in my career is that I have I had a lot less confidence when I started off. And
Mm,
then I gained a
mhm,
lot of confidence as I gained knowledge.
mhm,
And then I've lost that confidence, and
mm,
I've lost it willingly. Like I've given it away. Like
mhm.
and that's freeing, you know?
Wow.
I feel like that sometimes knowing the rules and knowing the information can be limiting. And so
Mhm.
that's where I'm saying like just do it. Like just have fun and be safe and make what you need to make. And I think that that's through the process, whether that's casting iron or not, whether
Mm-hmm.
that's casting bubble gum or whatever it
Yeah.
happens to be.
Yeah.
And I think that along with that comes, the idea of giving up the confidence. What I've learned too is that it's so easy to ask for help. Like,
Mm-hmm.
and I think that, I haven't talked about this because I really don't feel like it's been a struggle for me, but it's been a part of my life as being a woman you know,
Yeah.
in this community surrounded by primarily men,
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
in a field that does rely somewhat on strength,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
And a perceived, there is still a perceived kind of notion of what women should be doing and what men should
Mm-hmm.
be doing. And it's not, artists are open-minded, right, people, so
Mm-hmm.
it's
Mm-hmm.
not it's not like been a huge hurdle, but that is still there. And I think
Yeah.
that throughout my career, I think one of the wisest things that I did early on was to realize that I don't need to know it all. And
Mm.
I don't have to prove to anybody that I know it all, because it's impossible to know it all.
Yeah.
It's possible. I have no problem, and I had no problem. Like when I first got my job in Nebraska, I'd go to a plumbing store. I'd be
Mm-hmm.
like, okay, I'm trying to hook up this to this. And
Mm-hmm.
they're like, you're not supposed to do that. I'm like, I know. How do I do it? Like,
Yeah.
and so I think that that's it's freeing too. It's
Yeah.
freeing to go to other people and asking advice, and whether that's plumbing parts, or whether that's how to make your work, or whether that's what kind of work you should be making, or
Mm-hmm.
critique work. And it's just constantly being able to learn from others. And it's a gift. It's a
Yeah.
gift that when we're students, we might not think about. And those of us that are lucky enough to stay in some sort of community, whether that's academia, or whether that's a residency, or whether that's even just getting together to pour three, four
Mm-hmm.
times a year, I mean, that sharing and being able to get that feedback and help from others, it's such a huge gift, and it's so vital to our making. So I think that's my advice.
That's
And
great.
probably said nothing in the long scope of everything that I rambled on about, but
No, I think that it's funny because sometimes there's a saying that's like you hear what you need to hear when you need to hear it, sort of a thing. And so, I'm doing these interviews, I'm interviewing all these different people in different phases of their careers and their artistic lives. And I interviewed somebody in grad school, and I'm interviewing different professors and different independent artists or business owners that all have this link. But I feel like every single person I interview, I learn there's something that like hits me right where I need to be, like nudged. And I'm right now going through this phase of, I'm now that things are opening up and I am going to iron pours, like I should cast things. Like I should make molds and bring those molds to the iron pours that I'm gonna go to anyways. And I should cast things. But the perfectionism is holding me back, or it's like making me reluctant. Like, nah, I don't know what I'm doing. And so to hear you say, just do it, just go for it, just cast something. Like I was talking to Dylan Collins about just going to a dollar store, and should I just pick something and not worry about what's it going to mean at the end, or how is it going to release from the mold? Like maybe I'll have to smash it, but we already know that that's something I've employed in the past. But yeah, I think that this, like, since I've been out of it for so long, coming back into it, I'm putting more meaning on it than I should. And he's a very playful, kind of going through some playful times in his body of work. And so then for me to talk to you and have you say just do it, it's like giving me like, okay, this weekend do it. And so I'll I'll let you know how it goes, whatever it is. So now this is probably where we're going to end it for the public show. And then it's getting kind of late, but maybe can I still steal you for about 15 minutes and we'll maybe
Sure.
talk about something in the after show? Do you have like any stories that you want to tease?
Oh, I
I
don't know. I'm
have,
like, oh, I don't even see where's your after show ones. Like
it's like
what?
all the way at the end,
I
end of,
know.
so it's like all
Worst
of these
thing
are,
that's ever happened to you in an iron. Oh, I have a good story.
okay, that's it. That's where we'll leave it.
Maybe. So,
Wait, but we have to say goodbye and then
okay.
we'll go into the after show. Okay. So, for the public audience that's listening, I want to say thank you so much, Biz, for letting me interview you and for talking to me so long and this late at night. And I really appreciate you making time. It has been very enjoyable for me to get a chance to know you better.
Oh, this has been a blast. And thank you so much for thinking of me and Matt and everybody. It's just it's fabulous. What you're doing is amazing.
And I hope that, people that don't know you and Matt will get a chance to know you better through these interviews, but also, talking to Ashley, she she told me that listening to everybody's interviews, way out in Wyoming, she said it's like being able to get back in touch with these old friends that you love so much. And so that was not something that I came into this with the idea of doing, but now knowing that she's going to listen to this interview and then feel more connected to where you are right now, you know, she might even send you a text. You know what I mean? Like, so
Hi, Ash.
that,
Send me a text.
so that's like a unexpected benefit. I feel like is, just
Oh, and we
getting,
get to learn like from people that we do know really well too. We get to
yeah.
learn these little nuggets of like, I never knew that, right?
Yeah. Or like, you never told that story when I was around. Yeah. Yeah. So thank you. So let's say goodbye to the public audience. We hope that you'll eventually come over and join us in the after show because the stories from all of the after shows are still there and they will be forever. But thanks for tuning in and we'll see you in the next one. Thank you so much for tuning in today. I truly had so much fun hearing about the journey Biz has taken in both her life and her body of work. And hearing even more stories of the early days of Sloss Metal Arts can help us all put into perspective how far they've come. And I also think that learning how she and Matt brought iron casting to students in Ohio, Nebraska, and now have it at RIT, it shows us that with the right knowledge and drive, any of us can bring iron wherever we want to take it. Biz, thank you again. This conversation was tremendously rewarding for me, and I appreciate your honesty and all the stories that you have shared. These stories and your journey deliver a tremendous amount of value to me, and I'm sure many listeners as well. And that value is a function of all of your hard work over many years and your commitment to service and teaching. And of course, for one last word of thanks to our top supporter, Sloss Metal Arts, for supporting the show and helping me capture these snapshots of our community members as they recount their iron art origin stories. And of course, I'm truly looking forward to seeing everyone this year at Sloss for the national conference this upcoming April 5th through the 9th. So yes, thank you, Sloss Metal Arts, for supporting this podcast, as well as our other supporters on Patreon. The funds that they support me with are invaluable and help me to continue to produce these episodes. In return for their support, I offer the after show recordings to everyone on Patreon. And by now you already probably know that it's just an extra 15 to 20 minutes with each show's guest where we talk a little more candidly and share at least one more juicy story. And so if you're listening and you would like access to the after shows for each episode for as little as $1 a month, go to our Patreon page, which is patreon.com/podcastiron. There, you can choose a contribution level that fits within your budget. But supporters at any level get access to the after show from each episode. But if you don't have it in your budget to support the Podcast Iron on Patreon, that's okay. Instead, please share this podcast with someone you think will be interested in listening or watching, and I'll appreciate that just as much. Anything and everything helps, and for that I say thank you from the bottom of my heart. And if you want to get in touch with me, you can email me at thepodcastiron@gmail.com. Thanks again for listening and watching. I'm sending you all my love always, and I can't wait to share the next episode with you. I'll talk to you soon, and have a great day.